to Talk That Talk with Fallon Stokes. I'm your host, and we have a special guest today. We got Paul Hewitt, former basketball coach, Georgia Tech legend. But I wanted to have you on the podcast. It's been a while, Coach Hewitt. Welcome to the show.
It's great to see you. I always knew you were going to do great things, and here you are.
I'm trying. It's an everyday grind, but I'm trying, Coach. But let me just give a little bit of background, about you. You were born in Kingston, Jamaica, right?
Yes, Kingston, Jamaica, 1963, okay. And we moved to the United States in November of 1970. Moved to Brooklyn, New York.
Okay.
Stayed there for a short while, then moved to Jamaica, Queens, and out to Westbury, Long Island.
Okay, awesome. So born in Jamaica, but New York raised you. And you played ball at St. John Fisher College. I didn't even know you played ball, Coach. I don't think I knew that, but that's good to know. Yeah. Most coaches should have some basketball background. What position did you play?
I started out as a small forward. My senior year, I finished up playing. I was a starting center team. That basically tells you I wasn't as good a shooter as I thought I was. So my coach stuck me in center.
Oh, man. But started coaching in 1988 after your basketball career was over, and you were a grad assistant at USC. That's Southern Cal, not South Carolina. Right. And then progressed as an assistant at Fordham University and Villanova. And I know a lot of people know Fordham because that's where Denzel Washington went to school. I remember knowing. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And then you got your first head coaching job at Siena, where you did well with that team. Your teams were successful the time you were there, and then transitioned to Georgia Tech in 2000 when I was a freshman. So that was huge news. First Black coach to ever be hired as a head coach at Georgia Tech. And you did some tremendous things with that program during your tenure. And then you finished up at George Mason. So that's the background I have now. And right now, you're a scout for the Los Angeles Clippers, right?
Yes, I'm working for the Clippers. But I do want to take you back a little bit before I actually got into college coaching. I was a high school coach for 3 years.
Okay.
So I was a JV coach at Westbury High School. I was an assistant coach there. And the reason why that's significant to me is because I feel like this journey I've been on, this basketball journey I've been on, I've gotten a chance to see it at all levels. And the thing I've learned is that there's some really good people that are involved in this game. Even before I started coaching high school, Fallon, when I got out of high school in 1981, my high school basketball coach was the one that really convinced me to get into coaching and had me coach our summer league team. So I was an AAU coach, a grassroots coach. So, I've met a lot of people along the way, and overwhelming majority are just really good people trying to do the right thing by the kids. And now working with the Clippers, that background of high school coach, Division II assistant coach, Division I graduate assistant, head coach has really served me because it's amazing how many of those people I've come back around to meet and talk to as I do my job with the Clippers, some of the information I can get and some of the relationships I have that's really helped us to, help me to bring some value to the Clipper organization. As little as it may be, I try to bring some value.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. We're going to get into that too, just in your role in that position and just coaching college basketball in general. But just circling back, so talk a little bit about, after you finished your basketball career, you went back and just said from high school to D2, D1. But, what made you want to be a coach?
That's a great question. I love the game. I love sports. I grew up, in a family that loves sports. If it's horse racing, hockey, football, baseball, especially New York sports, I'm really big into it. But quite honestly, as I was growing up and I got this bug to coach, I never felt like I knew somebody that could help me get in. When you're a high school kid or a college kid and you're watching, Georgetown University on TV or North Carolina, you're thinking to yourself, that is so far out of reach. I give the credit to my high school basketball coach. Number one, he took us down to the Georgetown University basketball camp before my senior year of high school. And there I saw John Thompson. And wow. I just thought he was unbelievable. When he used to talk to our camp, do his lectures, he was around the whole week. Man, it was so impressive just to see this man and hear what he had to say and the knowledge he was dispensing. So then it kind of put the bug in my ear. As I got into college, I was a journalism major, an econ major, a dual major. I can always remember going to the career plan and placement office at St. John Fisher, and I would look at the boards at potential jobs out there. My eyes would always wander to the coaching profession. But even then, I'm thinking to myself, it's something out of reach. I was really focusing on journalism. And then finally, when I got out of college, I was home, and I ran into my high school basketball coach, And he said to me, listen, I got a job opportunity available to be assistant on my staff. Would you be interested? Sure. So I went up to the school, interviewed, and that kind of got me along the way. So the interest was always there. I was always making up roadblocks in my mind that I couldn't get there. And obviously, I was fortunate to be around people that impacted me from close and far and mentored me. And I was able to create a life for myself in the coaching profession.
And I'm glad you mentioned just the mentorship part of it. So like, who were some of your mentors that just helped you grow as a man and as becoming a coach?
Well, obviously my dad. I mean, my mom and dad were, they're all about education. I have two brothers, an older brother, an older sister, and a younger brother. And all four of us were, fortunate enough to go to college and graduate from college. If you ask my family where I land in the pecking order in terms of intelligence or SAT score, I don't mind telling you I was fourth. My brother's really smart. He has an engineering degree and a law degree.
Wow.
My sister's a hospital administrator, and my younger brother's a vice president at Comcast.
Oh, wow.
So exactly. So I had stiff competition around me. So but my mom and dad were all about education, even though sometimes I would get a little wayward. And then when I got into the coaching profession, my high school basketball coach, God rest his soul, was the guy that really put the bug in my ear about becoming a coach. And when I got out of college with my econ and journalism degree, I couldn't really find anything that I really loved to do from a job standpoint. Mm-hmm. So when I started doing the coaching thing, I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to get a master's degree in guidance counseling and become a high school basketball coach and high school guidance counselor. But as things flowed, I met people and I kept moving forward. And so on the college level, the most important mentor I had was George Raveling, former coach, Washington State, Iowa, and he finished his career at USC. He gave me an opportunity to come out and be a graduate assistant at USC. And that was 89, 90. And since then, I mean, he was responsible, had a big hand in me getting the assistant coach's job at Villanova University. Mm-hmm. He was the guy that pushed it over the top for me at Siena. And I'll never forget when I got the job at Georgia Tech, I went and met with him and we spent probably like 8 hours. And he gave me pages and pages of notes of things to think about to do to be successful at Georgia Tech. And I can tell you, Fallon, there were so many things he told me. And, he has a favorite term. You need somebody who can tell you where the potholes are in the road so you don't break your ankle. And he was a guy that kind of told me a lot of things. You got to remember now, Coach Raveling was the first Black assistant coach ever in the ACC. He was Lefty Drizel's assistant at the University of Maryland. So not only was he my mentor, but I think he took special pride in the fact that here's one of his guys now becoming a coach in the ACC to try to prepare me and kind of give me some guidance. But, Coach Raveling is, there are a lot of other guys, but it really, he's in the basketball world, he's the guy for me.
Yeah. So like, I know, especially we talk about being a Black man, being the first Black head coach at Georgia Tech, like, what hurdles did you face making that transition from an assistant and then trying to get your first head coaching job at Siena? Like, how tough was that?
I never really looked at it in a way of like, hey, I'm trying to become a head coach. Okay. It was a goal. I wanted it, but I loved working at Villanova. I had a very good head coach I was working for, Steve Lapis. Mm-hmm. Again, coming from a guy who never thought he could be in coaching or get into coaching. Now here I am sitting on a bench, we're winning Big East championships, playing for the Big East title, coaching players like Tim Thomas and Albert Williams, who went on, Malik Allen went on playing a long time in the NBA. It was a dream come true for me. The Siena job actually came up. Steve Clifford, who's now the coach, I think he's in Orlando, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. Steve was a long time, he was an assistant at Siena, and we were friends. And he called me up. I remember we had just got knocked out of the NCAA tournament. We had lost to Cal. Okay. We were down at Wake Forest, actually, at the site. And he called me up and said, hey, I think you should apply for this job. I think you can get it. Well, I looked into it, and things fell in the right way, and I ended up getting the job. But I can't honestly say I ever sat down, and spent a lot of time thinking about, boy, I want to be a head coach. I was just trying to do my job at Villanova, which I cherished well. And we did it well enough that we went to, I think, 3 NCAA tournaments in the 5 years I was there. We won an NIT championship, turned out a bunch of pros. It was a great experience. And like I said, working for Steve Lapis was a good experience.
Okay. So when you get your first head coaching job at Siena, you do well. You're there for about three or four seasons, 3 years. And you get MAC Coach of the Year your last year there. And then you transition and come to Tech. And your first year at Tech, you get ACC Coach of the Year. So How was it making that transition? And did you have to change your coaching style between those two conferences a bit, just to compete in the ACC and deal with that rigorous schedule?
Yeah, I'm going to take your second part of your question. Like, what changing coaching styles in the ACC, that was a must. Because what we did at Siena was we pressed and ran and played a much more of an open court, free-flowing game. And then when we got to the ACC, I remember one night we were playing against Duke, and they got Chris Duhon and Jason Williams. And you try to press those two guys? No. They're just cutting right through their pressure. They might have threw up 110 points on us. So we did have to adjust. I did have to adjust my coaching style. But I think a lot of the things that we stressed off the court or in preparation for playing was the same. Like, we were big on obviously trying to be as disciplined as we can, be in the best shape we can, took the best care of our bodies. And the player development piece, which is something that I will always feel like that's the reason why I had any success as a coach. We really work with our kids. You were around, how we do individual instruction. I'm sure Coach Daryl LeBarry used to complain all the running that we had to do. But there was a little method to the madness. So, in terms of what we valued and what we emphasized, that didn't change. It was about being in great shape, both mentally and physically, and really working on that player's game so when they got in the game, they could go out there and make plays. And it was successful.
I got you. So, before, you got to Tech, we know Bobby Crimmins, a legend at Georgia Tech, and the type of players he recruited over the years from the likes of Mark Price, John Sally, just to name a few, Kenny Anderson. But, how big was recruiting when you got there and how you wanted to rebuild the program and trying to continue to get top recruits to come to Georgia Tech?
Yeah, that's it. You know how it is in this business. If you don't have good players, I don't care how good a coach you are, you're not going to win games.
Right.
And so one of the things that Coach Ravlin, when he sat down with that 8-hour meeting we had, and it lasted, it was, I'll tell you exactly, I'll give you the setting. We're down at the Boo Williams tournament in Hampton, Virginia.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And at the end of the day, when the games are over, he invited me back to his hotel, and we sat down. And Coach Rav, if you know him, is big for having his yellow legal pads.
Uh-huh.
And so I've picked up that habit. You're going to see around my desk right here, I have a yellow legal pad. This is a Coach Ravlin thing. I'm constantly keeping notes. And he had notes for days. And one of the things he told me, he said, Paul, you're going to realize in Atlanta, especially when you're recruiting black athletes, a lot of them have family members in the city of Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, as we started going, Chris Bosch's uncle lived in Stone Mountain. Jared Jackson's godfather, Curly Dossman, lived in Atlanta. DeAndre Bell had family in Atlanta. And so we looked at it as, okay, what do we have to sell that we can really to attract some of these players? We had a great academic institution. It's going to be a challenging academic institution. We had a track record of turning out NBA players, but then that family component, being able to try to tell them, hey, there are going to be some people around here, especially for kids who are coming from a distance.
Mm-hmm.
There are going to be people around here that can make you feel comfortable. And so, yeah, we dove right into recruiting because obviously, especially in the ACC, you got to have talent to compete against the likes of Carolina and Duke and at the time, Maryland. Those three programs were three of the top programs in the country. If you remember correctly, Maryland went to the Final Four in 2001 and they ended up winning it in 2002 right here in Atlanta.
Right. I remember that one. That was a good one. So really after recruiting, that's another thing. You've recruited so much talent over the years, I know. And who would you say was probably your top recruit? I'm assuming maybe Chris Bosh, but I don't know. I'm going to let you have that one. Because what's the selling point to get somebody as big as Chris Bosh to agree to come to an institution like Georgia Tech that's very hard academically, but how are you selling somebody like that to come to your school? What was the sales pitch?
It was about academics. Chris was a self-proclaimed computer geek. Okay, this is the guy that used to do computer animation contests. Before he went off to play his AAU basketball tournaments. His AAU coach Mitch Malone told me he'd have to go pick Chris up at these competitions where they would have they would have these little mini robots and they have to complete tasks. I don't really know much about it, but he was interested in computer graphics. Chris was an honor student at Lincoln High School in Dallas, Texas. Mm-hmm. And it was just a fit. It was just a real good fit in terms of what he was looking for academically, opportunity to play in the ACC, a city like Atlanta. Uncle Steve was up there in Stone Mountain. So it just all came together. I will tell you, I was even surprised at how quickly he made the decision. He came on his recruiting weekend. I remember dropping them off at the airport on a Sunday morning because you know how the visits usually work. They come in on Friday, leave on Sunday.
Right.
And I went back to the office, did a few hours of work, and I'm driving up 75, and I look at my phone, and it's his mom calling. She's like, Coach, Chris got something to tell you. I'm like, oh, man, what are you going to tell me to do? Want to come here? He gets on the phone and says, Coach, I just wanted to let you know I'm going to be committed to Georgia Tech tomorrow. And we're his first visit and only visit.
Mm-hmm.
And he hung up. And Mrs. Bosch on the phone was like, that's it? I said, that's. She said, Coach, I don't have time to fool around. She goes, I got a job. I can't be taking all these Fridays off to come see y'all. I was like, listen, I'm not going to argue with you. But it was a hook academically. That was a thing. And along the time we were there, you know, Thaddeus Young was a 4.0 student. Iman Shump was a great student. Jarrett was an excellent student. Ishmael Muhammad, BJ. You can go down the line. That was the thing. We tried to find guys, obviously, that could play in the ACC, but also academically were a fit to what we were trying to do.
Right. And I know that's extremely hard, you know, finding the balance of talent and academics at a school at Georgia Tech. But like, just tell us, going back to the players you just named, Chris Bosh, Jared Jack, Ishmael Muhammad, BJ Elder, those were players who played on your Final Four team, you know, when you played in the championship game. So talk about that story season and, you know, how great it was to, you know, make or reach that accomplishment, especially after losing a talent like Chris Bosh in the draft the year before. So how was it building that team?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. You're one of the few people when I talk about that team, they all assume Chris was on that group, with that group.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? We come into that year, and I thought we'd be good. I wasn't sure, to be honest with you. But as practice got going 2 or 3 weeks, and I realized I would come back to the coach's locker room, you know, across from, you know, right next to the office. You know where it is up there in the Coliseum. And I would tell our staff, I said, you know what, these guys, I think they got a chance to do pretty good. And then about 3 weeks into practice, I watched an exhibition game. Michigan State was number 3 in the country that year. They were playing the Harlem Globetrotters, one of those televised exhibitions on ESPN. And I sat and studied their team. And I came back to practice the next day. I said, listen, if that's the 3rd best team in the country, then we can win the national championship. And it's interesting, like when you make a proclamation like that to a group that maybe is not sure because we fell a little short the year before, you could see the confidence grow. And as that year went on, I remember we scrimmaged. We had a little inner squad, a scrimmage, I should say. We brought in some of the former NBA players that were still around before they went off to their jobs overseas. Tony Akins was there. One of the Barry boys was there. There were a couple other guys. I can't remember. And we played really, really well against a bunch of guys that were older. They weren't in tip-top shape, but they were professionals. And that's when I realized, like, this team has a chance. And Fallon, you understand. You've been around it. You played on successful teams. When you have good players of high character that get along,
right,
you got a chance to do something. And that team really was close.
Right. I mean, I just think about the comparison. Like you already had Jared, and then you get Will, who's coming on board that year. And, you know, he's a highly talented, recruited prospect, and having to get just those two to buy in. You know, you go from Will, who easily could be a starter somewhere else, but he's coming off the bench. And I just thought, you know, how you got them to buy in, you know, Mo, Clarence Moore coming back and joining that team. I just thought it was a very special group, and it was special to see. I had to go to San Antonio to see it myself. So,
you know, it's interesting you mentioned the part about Will. He transferred from University of Arizona. But before we took him as a transfer, I went to Jarrett and said, what do you think? I said, you should bring him in. He didn't skip a beat. He said, absolutely, Coach. If he can help us win, bring him in here. And so, you know, you got to make sure that, you know, you give your players some ownership on all this. And that's what made that transition so easy, or that, you know, bringing Will in, bringing him to the group was so easy, because the guy that he was going to be competing for playing time didn't blink, didn't bat an eye. It's like, absolutely bring him in. Right.
And it probably made them both better in the long run, because, look, they both made it to the league, so it had great careers. So that's a special group. But just transitioning a little bit, just about the state of college basketball right now. And, you know, recruiting, the NCAA, the violations you're starting to see these schools get hit with. And I want to say, you know, from what I've seen, a lot of minority or Black coaches getting hit with some heavy violations. So just what are your thoughts right now with just how the NCAA is starting to police or becoming more stringent in policing these college programs?
Yeah. You know, it's disappointing to see the face of this investigation be about the Black assistant coaches who have been let go. The FBI investigation started, I'm going to say it's like 2016, 2017.
It was around that time.
And how I found out about it, I was out in Los Angeles. It was late September. And I was out there for our preseason meetings before we went on the road to start the scouting for the draft of the following year. And a friend of mine called me and said, hey, turn on ESPN. The FBI is about to have an announcement about this scandal in college basketball. I turned on the TV. It was like 6:15 in the morning. I was getting ready to go work out before we had our meeting started. And I turned on the TV and I saw it on the ticker and I saw the names, Book Richardson, who's a good friend, Tony Bland, who I don't know that well, Lamont Evans, who's a good friend, and Chuck Person. And I'm on the phone with my friend and I'm watching this thing on the ticker. And Fallon, I promise you, I said to him, I said, listen, I've seen this movie before. I know how this is going to end. I said, the Black coaches are going to be losing their jobs and the white coaches are going to be granted, which they should, a presumption of innocence and due process and continue to work. And I hung up the phone. I said to him, his name is Reggie. I said, Reggie, listen, man, I got to do my workout. I said, I don't need to watch this. I know how this movie's going to end. And I went off and did my workout, and I've been watching it very patiently over the last 3 to 4 years. And, you know, I'm not an advocate of unethical behavior. If you cheat, definitely, you should be called on the carpet and you should be punished, whatever that punishment is. But it does make me disappointed when I see this consistent trend over the years that when I first broke into business, one of the things that Coach Raffling told me, he says, don't ever cheat. That's the only way you're going to lose your job. And, you know, over the years, I've watched, you know, when issues come up, the scapegoat is consistently, too often, I should say, maybe not because too often, it's the Black assistant coach that gets, hey, you did something wrong, move on, and the head coach stays in place. And again, I'm not advocating that anybody lose their job. What I'm looking for is fairness. What I'm advocating for is everybody should have the right, the backing from their institutions. Because you see some of these schools, they're supporting their coach, and they should. Black or white, they should support their coach. If they think their coach did nothing wrong, they shouldn't back down to the NCAA. They should have a fair hearing where all the evidence is displayed and then you can come to a mutually agreed upon decision. But it does hurt me to see guys, there's some guys, I'm not going to throw their names out, that I know are good people, have done nothing wrong, and they've lost their jobs. And their lives have been turned upside down. And it's just, it hurts me. It really does, because, you know, when we start talking about terms like fairness and equity and being rewarded for doing, you know, your work, and also being punished for not doing something the right way, it's disappointing to see. I don't see that fairness across the board like it should be.
And, you know, that speaks volumes. I can say even in this racial climate, you know, what we continue to see is the disparities of how African Americans or Blacks are treated in the workforce, but, you know, especially in sports and in coaching. And it crosses over professional sports, the lack of Black representation you see as head coaches in the NBA, college coaches, the very few numbers you see, the majority being assistants, great assistants that can recruit these players, these Black athletes that go to play for these college programs. But it seems like they're the ones that get hit so hard. So do you think, like, with the type of regulations the NCAA has or has set forth, that it's just hard to recruit and to follow the rules on a consistent basis? Because sometimes it seems like the smallest thing can get you with a violation where you're paying a fine, or you could possibly lose your job.
No, I don't think it's hard to recruit. I really don't. I mean, I think if you don't have a plan and if you don't work hard, then it's going to be hard. But I think it's easy to recruit and let me rephrase that. I think you can be successful in recruiting without breaking the rules. My issue with the NCAA is I think some of the rules they put out there are discouraging young kids about the game of college basketball and how great opportunity it is. The guys that I've come across that have cheated are the ones that don't want to do the work. Now, what I will tell you is I think the overwhelming majority of college coaches do it the right way. Are there some guys that cheat? Absolutely. You also have to understand, and this is going to be a long-winded answer, so bear with me. Cut me off. Throw
No.
up a T if you want to throw up a T.
No, take your time. I got all the time in the world.
Let's take the FBI scandal.
Okay.
Let's take the case of Oklahoma State. Okay. Lamont Evans, and it's just all I've read, supposedly took money from an agent who actually was an FBI agent, posing as an agent, to direct a player to his company.
Okay.
Wrong. Shouldn't do that. You're violating the trust of a student athlete. Definitely should be sanctioned. Definitely, whatever the punishment is. But I have yet for anybody to tell me what the competitive advantage was that Lamont Evans gained by accepting money from somebody to help a player that's already on his team.
Right.
To go sign with an agency.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm not with that. I mean, and I had some of the best players of their times. I mean, we had players that were really sought after by agents. I would never take a nickel for those kids. It would be violating their trust, violating the trust that their parents and their uncles and their aunts and their family members and their friends put in us. But when somebody tells me that the FBI scandal is about cheating, no, it's about unethical behavior. There was no advantage gained by somebody saying, hey, if you give me this money, I'll make sure this kid signs with you. I don't know how the world works when it comes to, say, let's say Wall Street, and you're actually out there trying to, sign clients. There are bonuses sometimes that come with, hey, if you come with us. Again, I don't know. I don't want to delve too into it because I'm going to sound ignorant and I'll probably say something stupid. But at the same time, what I have an issue with the NCAA is they put in rules that are almost like, I don't know. I'm not saying it as eloquent as I like to, but I just think sometimes the rules are there to trip people up as opposed to trying to make the game better and more productive especially for the kids, for the students.
Right.
There are things that we can do, and we're getting along that road now with the name, image, and likeness. We're on that road where I think, we might start doing some things that are going to be for the benefit of the kids, and also eliminate some of these rules that end up getting people fired and getting schools put on probation. And to me, I'm looking for where's the competitive advantage that was gained by doing this. And again, I'm not condoning it, but there's a difference between doing something to get a player that's going to help you win a national championship and something that has nothing to do with gaining. If anything, it helps to destabilize your team.
Right. And I totally agree with that, because you always are looking at, well, what's the unethical behavior that took place? Like, what advantage did the program gain? Even if they didn't get the kid, if he went to another school. So I'm like, you backtrack and you want to penalize these institutions for certain actions, but it still doesn't make sense because it's not like it improved their program at all. So I think it's a balancing act. And I had some issues with the fact that I really thought the NCAA wasn't doing their job. You had to have the FBI step in to try and, police what your policies are. And now you're trying to step in and go a little more hardcore, on these rules and regulations to try and police whatever unethical activity you believe is going on in college basketball. So that's a very interesting point. But what's your whole thought process, especially now that you've transitioned to the professional side of the one and dones? Just the benefits of student athletes going to college, but understanding the fact that they have an opportunity to make extreme amounts of money and, improve themselves and their families. That decision, it's like a no-brainer. But what are your thoughts about one and done athletes?
Obviously, my comments here, I don't speak for the NBA. I think anytime a kid can go to college, it's going to be for his betterment.
Right.
I would like to see a system set up where, similar to baseball, where a kid can put his name in the draft.
I say that all the time.
But people think he can go out of high school, that's it. But the difference with baseball, people don't, the details are, get in the weeds. If you're a high school senior, you can put your name in the draft. You can get drafted. You can negotiate with a team. So to the nickel what you're being offered before you decide whether you can go to college or not, if you want to go to college or not. Too often in college basketball, kids put their name in, and it's either you're in or out. There's no dilly-dally. And so I think kids sometimes get imperfect information. They put the name in the draft night comes, reality hits them, they don't get drafted, or they get drafted where they're not getting guaranteed contract opportunities, and now their lives are a little bit more uncertain. I'd like to see what they do in baseball, where you can put your name in the draft, you can negotiate with the team. If you don't like the offer, you can go back to school. Or even better, let's take hockey. Every year you can get drafted in hockey. Or if you get drafted and the team holds your rights, I should say, the team will hold your rights, and each year they'll give you an assessment and say, all right, you need to go back to college one more year, and then we'll take you out after your junior year, after your sophomore year. And again, I'm not advocating this, but in hockey, there are players that will play in the NCAA Frozen Four. After that event's over, their NHL team that owns their draft rights will say, hey, you're ready now. We need you for the upcoming Stanley Cup playoffs. We're going to sign you right off that campus and put you on the ice where you can make money. So I don't think the players in college basketball are given the opportunity to get the accurate information so they make decisions. I get frustrated when I hear somebody say, well, that kid made a dumb decision. That basketball player made a dumb decision. And I tell them, I said, if you had incomplete information, you'd probably make a dumb decision too. Whereas in baseball and hockey, they know to the nickel what they're going to get. And then they decide, okay, you know what? My college degree is worth more than that. Let me continue to pursue this.
Right. When you were a college coach, did you try and stay away from one and dones when recruiting, or?
No.
Okay.
They had to be good players that wanted to go to school.
Right.
We had Chris Bosh, Thaddeus, Javaris, Derek Favors. So we had, we were trying to find the kids that had great grades that could help us compete in the ACC, because the one thing about the ACC, it's a talent-driven league. If you want to try to compete, we competed for the ACC championship in 2005 and 2010. In 2005, we had Jared Jack, Will Bynum. They led the way. Two guys that had, I think Will was 9 years in the NBA. Jared's 13, maybe going on 14. And then in 2010, we had Amon Shumpert, who had a long career in the NBA, still active. Derek Favors still active. So you got to have players, and a lot of those times are one and done. You look at Duke now. I mean, they've gone that route of getting, a lot of one and done players, because you got to have talent to compete in that league.
You do. So, we've talked about a little bit about the lack of diversity in college coaching. Why do you think that Black coaches seem to get such few opportunities to become head coaches?
That's a great question. You always got to look at history, right? You got to figure out, okay, what changed? What happened from point X to, point Y? So let's think about 2005, Power 5 conference. You have about 40% of the coaches in the Power 5 conferences are Black.
Okay.
From 2005 to now 2020, we have less than, I think it's like 11% of the Power 5 coaches are Black. If you add the Big East and the American Conference, it jumps up to 18%, 19%. Don't quote me on that. I don't think that's exactly 100% accurate. So you got to start looking and saying to yourself, okay, well, what changed? From 2005 to 2000, what changed? Well, the people who are selecting the coaches changed. Let's look at the profile of athletic directors. Let's look at the system that we use to identify the candidates. So from 2005 to now, we had more athletic directors coming out of the corporate world, as opposed to, guys that were former players, as opposed to young women, women that were longtime administrators on college campus that was used to dealing with a diverse community of people, of students. If you're, let's take Moose, for instance, okay,
right.
Georgia Tech, Mike Stamos. He's been on men's basketball. Mike has been used to dealing with a lot of diverse people, diversity of people. So if he was picking a coach, it wouldn't be foreign idea to him to pick somebody that was Black. The other thing that changed was we had search firms come in. So we had these firms that were helping the the athletic directors and presidents identify the sort of quote unquote best candidates. Again, we're talking about non-sports people. Psychologists can prove that when you're making a choice of who you want to be with you, you're going to naturally gravitate to people who look like you, who have shared experiences to you. And so when I look at what's going on in college basketball, it's not a reflection of not having qualified candidates. There are a lot of qualified. You have a kid up at Villanova, Kyle Neptune, sat on the bench for 2 national champions. Can't get a head job.
Wow.
I think about a kid like Uric Malachi at Texas Tech, excellent coach, can't get a head job. And I'm just going off the top of my head. I just throw out names. Kamani Young at UConn hasn't been interviewed for a head job. But, and I'm sure there are guys I'm missing. There are a couple of kids down at Florida. I call them kids. I'm 57 now. Okay, Darius Nichols, who's assistant at Florida. I tried Dean Keener, and I tried to recruit him a little bit when I was at Georgia Tech. But they're out there. They're just not being identified. They're not being promoted like a lot of the white assistant coaches are. And they're qualified coaches on both sides, but don't anybody ever come up to me and tell me, well, there's nobody out there that's qualified. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
I know that when I was in the ACC, there was one time we had 7 black coaches in the league. So they're out there. The coaches are out there. You just got to make the effort to find them. And again, I think as the profile of ADs change from former coaches or people that were around sports and athletic departments for their whole adult lives to people who are coming out of corporate world. And I think it's pretty, we know what the issues are in corporate America in terms of the boardroom and higher level upper management positions. They're not looking at a diversity in their boardroom. So they're not, I don't want to say they're not comfortable, they're not used to thinking that way of putting that person in a leadership position. Right. I was fortunate Dave Brain was a football player, football coach. So it was nothing for him to say, hey, here's a guy. Okay, I don't care if he's black, white, purple, whatever. This is the best guy for the job. Let's bring him here. Let's get going. Right. Then you bring in other people who don't think like that, who don't. And I'm not saying they're bad people.
Right.
It's just that their orientation does not permit them to look objectively and say, hey, you know what? This guy, Kyle Neptune, must be a hell of a coach. He sat next to Jay Wright for X number of years. They won 2 national championships. He knows how to construct a championship level team. Like, people should be beating down that kid's door to get
right.
a job.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. And you make a good point, because I remember Dave Brain as an athletic director. I thought he was amazing for the student athlete. That's all he truly cared about, was making sure the student athlete got the best experience possible. And he listened, and I won't name names, but eventually it was a transition. And I had some opportunities to work with that administration. And you did see how much of it was a business sort of attitude, like coming from corporate America. Rather than thinking about the student athletes, it was about how can we generate more money for this program.
Dave Brain, every August when we came back to school, he'd have a department meeting. And for, I guess, the 5 or 6 years I was with him when we had those meetings before he retired, he would always end the meeting with this statement. He said, remember why we're here. We're here for the student athletes. If not for them, none of us have jobs. And so it's amazing that you would say that, because when people ask me, like, what was it like working with Dave? And I would sum it up with that statement. Like clockwork. We'd talk about the summer, what everybody did. Here's our goals for this coming season. And he would always close the meeting with that statement.
Yeah, that was amazing. And his door was always open, so you felt comfortable talking to him. Yeah, you don't see that much in college athletics anymore from athletic directors, from what I can see.
But you know what's interesting, Fallon? Like, I think it's a really lost opportunity to create a long-lasting, productive program. Because the reality is, everything that goes around in the athletic department, if you want to be successful, field good teams. Put some good players out there. Put some good teams out there. And if the players feel like they're cared for, that they're valued and that they're important, they're just not a cog in a wheel, then they become more productive. And the more you win, the more people want to jump on the bandwagon with you.
Right. Everybody's happy. So, just talking about black coaches, you were right with those percentages. What I was looking up, if you include HBCU head coaches, I think the number is around 24% nationally about how many. Yeah. So it's pretty crazy. But now you're starting to see a bit of a transition, like McCord Maker committing to go to Howard University.
Yeah.
Instead of going to a Power 5 school where they were recruiting him hard. He very well could be a one and done. But what are your thoughts about black athletes starting to make the transition to look at HBCUs again rather than going to Power 5 conferences?
I think everybody has their own individual decision to make, and they got to try to find what's the best path for me to enjoy long-term success?
Mm-hmm.
I applaud the young man for doing it. I hope other young men follow in his footsteps.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if a young man decides he wants to go to Georgia Tech over South Carolina State,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to criticize him, because Georgia Tech offers a tremendous platform, a great education in a tremendous city, a great city.
Right.
But what I will say is this. I remember growing up, again, I got out of high school in 81. I always remember looking at the statistics at that time. I don't know what they are now, of the most successful politicians, doctors, lawyers, educators, Black educators, okay, in their field. And I would always look at their bios, and it was amazing how many of them came from HBCUs. There was I guess there's a feeling when you're at an HBCU where you feel like, hey, I belong, I can do this. I'm being filled with confidence. I went to predominantly white school, which was a great experience. If I do it all over again, absolutely would do it. But I can remember my first year there, people asking me how I got into school. Did you come in through a special admission program? At the time, it was called HEOP, a Higher Education Opportunity Program. Or did you get in here on a basketball scholarship? Well, I did get a basketball scholarship, but I can remember even back then, and I wasn't that socially conscious, I'll be first to admit it, thinking to myself, like, these people around here think the only way I could have gotten into the school is if I came in through a special admission program or an athletic, route. And I'm thinking to myself, like, that's the first time in my life when I started to become more conscious of what was going on in society, how Blacks were treated as opposed to whites. Because I went to predominantly Black high school, and we were happy. We had a great experience. My mom, my dad provided a great household for us. I had great friends. I wanted for nothing, but I lived in a predominantly Black world. And when I went off to St. John Fisher, which was overwhelmingly white, that's the first time I started to realize, like, whoa, this is different out here.
Right.
And
Right.
it's not this thing that, we're all equal and we're all judged, on the same field. And those little things about, well, how'd you get in here? And you must have gotten through a special program. You didn't really probably get in here on your own merit. If you let it, it'll chip away at your confidence. And to go back to your point about McCord, being in that environment of a Howard University, where he's going to come across Black professors, Black counselors, Black administrators. Obviously, he's got a Black coach in Kenny Blayton, who's a terrific coach. There's something to be said when you see people that look like you in positions of power, and it gives you something to aspire to. You can say, I can get there because they can get there too, or they got there.
Right. And now they have a vice president elect, and
how about that, right?
Kamala Harris.
Shout out to Kamala Harris.
Right. So I think it's just been bringing more attention, and when you do see some of these alums coming from HBCUs and the positions they're in, it's pretty amazing that you just have to take a second look and be like, you could do well. I think it's just the position you put yourself in, but hopefully the athletic programs can continue to build, maybe generate more money for HBCUs. But I know that's a huge selling point. The differences you see between a Power 5 school, the facilities, the money, compared to an HBCU that might still have a high school gym. So it's going to have to be
if you don't mind, if I can plug something that I've gotten involved with. I've been asked by a group of coaches, and I humbly accepted to help start up an organization called Black Coaches United. And the organization came about obviously during the pandemic, and then the George Floyd murder and all the issues that have, all the incidents that have really sparked this new racial reckoning, if you will. And we're starting to examine ourselves as a society and what's going on in terms of, are we truly doing what we have to do to make things equal for everybody? So Black Coaches United is an organization that has been formed to address what's going on in the game of basketball, from grassroots, both boys and girls, up to men's and women's college basketball, WNBA, NBA. And our hope is to provide a platform where we mentor coaches, we help to educate coaches, and we also advocate for coaches. When our website's unveiled, I think people will see it has a unique opportunity to really give some of our young coaches out there the opportunity to get their name out there. And whether it's a TJ Cleveland up at St. John's, like give those guys an opportunity to put themselves out there, so ADs, presidents that may be looking for a coach, they can click on our website and see something about those people, have them do some video testimonies, and also at the same time understand that, as I say, at the intersection of sports and society, there are a lot of issues that basketball coaches, basketball players who have that platform can address. I mean, obviously you see it with the NBA, what they've done with their social justice initiatives, as well as the WNBA. So our group, Black Coaches United, number one, again, mentor, teach, advocate for some of these young coaches, both on the men's and women's side, so we can see more Black coaches in position of power and end up being, great role models for our younger people as they come up.
No, I think that's awesome. Thanks for giving that plug. I think that's amazing.
Blackcoaches.org. That's going to be the website when it comes up, blackcoaches.org. But it's called, on Twitter, it's the Black Coaches United.
Okay, awesome. We'll definitely put a plug in for you, Coach. But I always like to end the show. I call them the Talk That Talk questions, the triple TQs. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and you just tell me off the top of your head. Give me your thoughts. Okay. So what advice would you give to an aspiring head coach?
An aspiring head coach. So that means we're assuming that they're right now assistant coaches.
Yeah, assistant or whatever the case may be. It could be a young college kid.
Yeah, be the best that you can where you are at that time. I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but you asked me earlier in this conversation, did you think much about becoming a head coach? Not a lot. What I thought about a lot was, how can I make Steve Lapis and the Villanova program be the best it can be? We were fortunate to win a Big East championship there. Went to 3 straight NCAAs, like I said, won an NIT. Had a bunch of pros come out of there. First one and done I ever recruited, a kid named Tim Thomas out of Paterson, New Jersey.
I remember him.
Yeah, so it was about just be the best you can. The next step, and this is something Coach Ravlin has always told me about, unfortunately, you have to promote yourself a little bit. Back when I was coming up, being a self-promoter was not good, but you got to promote yourself a little bit. And you have so many opportunities now. You can put content out there on YouTube. You can put content out there on Twitter, Instagram. If you do a breakdown on a team, let's say you pick a team from overseas and you like how their coach runs offense. Do a breakdown on it, put it out there for people to watch, and it'll be a great way to get your name out there. So you do, unfortunately, the days of not self-promoting, where if you were self-promoted, it was looked down on when I came up in profession. You got to self-promote now.
Oh, yeah.
Be great at what you are. Be great at what you are. That's the first step to being a head coach.
Great advice. I think that's a first step to having a great life, a successful life too. What advice would you give to a young kid who is aspiring to become a collegiate athlete playing on the D1 level? Like what are coaches looking for when they recruit?
Well, and this is not some canned cliched answer. You better have the grades, because the rules are such now, it's getting harder and harder to achieve academic eligibility for a scholarship. So number 1, grades. Number 2, you have to dedicate yourself to the game and being a versatile player. You've got to be able to dribble the ball. You got to be able to shoot the ball. You got to be able to pass the ball. And I think sometimes players do one or the other too much. They either work individually too much and not enough in a 5-on-5 game situation, or they play all 5-on-5 and they don't work on their skills. You got to find that balance. The third thing that's really important, especially now because of all the attention social media grabs. Kids sometimes want to put stuff out there on social media to get attention, only to find out what they put out there 14 and 15 years old can come back and bite them when it comes time for, if a school's going to offer them a scholarship or not. So be smart. Be smart about what you expose what you expose. And obviously, if you're just a good person to begin with, you don't have to worry about that. You'll make wise decisions. But, bullying people, I don't know if you saw the story about recently a first-round draft pick for, I think, the Arizona Coyote hockey team, I think, or the Phoenix Coyotes. They rescinded the draft pick because they found out some things in his past about bullying. And so just be a good person. And I got to tell you, Fallon, being a part of this NBA thing, and we dig deep into the background of a lot of these players before we draft them. There's some really good kids out there. Even kids that have had some issues that came up in their past. When you get down to the bottom, there's a really honest and innocent reason why the incident happened.
Right.
But at the same time, there are some out there who make some decisions, and we disqualify them. We just say, look, this is not the type of person we want in our program with the LA Clippers. Our owner, Steve Ballmer, is a great owner. Lawrence Frank, our president. Assistant GM, Mark Hughes. Ty Lue, our head basketball coach. They're all really good people, and we want to make sure, as a scout, it's my job and my fellow scouts with the Clippers to continue to surround them with good people.
Oh, great. And the last question, what is the legacy you want to leave for future generations?
The legacy I want to leave for future generations. I hope it's not something that I understand yet or know yet. This opportunity to be a part of Black Coaches United gives me a rare opportunity to give back to a game that's helped me so much. I was a benefactor of the Black Coaches Association in the late 80s, early 90s. That's how I got my mentors through that. I met Coach Raveling through the BCA. I met Coach Thompson, obviously going to basketball camp as a young kid, but also through the BCA. Names that you probably wouldn't remember, you don't know, Clint Bryan, who's the AD at Augusta State. A guy named Kenny Williamson, the late Kenny Williamson, was one of my mentors. Those guys did an unbelievable job of teaching me, opening doors for me. And I hope that with this group, Black Coaches United, if we can get some of these talented young coaches, both on the men's and the women's side, opportunities to get interviews and eventually get jobs, and I start to see more balance and more fairness in the hiring structure and the hiring practices of Division I, II, and III schools, then I'll say, okay, that's what I hope people turn back and say, that's the legacy. That would be that he gave back to a game that did so much for him.
That's awesome, Coach. I just want to thank you for joining the show. I mean, you enlightened me today, but really gave some great information. I'm always great. I always love doing these interviews because I learn so much about people. And I think that's sometimes what you have to. I knew you were a great man. Everything you've done for me or did for me while I was in school or just helping me with internships or opportunities, I'm forever grateful and appreciative. But, it's good to highlight people and to come back and see what they're doing now and learn about their journey to get a better understanding how they reach their ultimate goal or, accomplish so many things. So again, I want to thank you for joining the podcast. Thank you for just giving us all that knowledge this afternoon.
Fallon, thank you very much. And you were an easy winner to pick. Trust me. I saw you walk around campus. I knew you were destined to do some great things. Okay. So it was easy to make those phone calls on your behalf.
Oh man. Thank you so much, Coach. I wish you, the fam, the best. Please give Mrs. Hewitt, tell her I said hello, give her my best and the girls as well. But thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Oh, man. Well, that was a great interview. We had Coach Paul Hewitt, former basketball coach at Georgia Tech. Like I said, when I started at Tech in 2000 as a freshman, Coach Hewitt was new to campus and he was just had taken over the men's program at Tech and did some great, amazing things. He took us back talking about that journey to the Final Four back in 2004 when they played in the championship game. Lost to UConn in the championship, but that season was incredible. And he had so many great teams, had so many great players that went on to play in the NBA, went to play overseas. But he has been a great coach and just a great gift to the game of college basketball. So great to see that he's still paying it forward, trying to help a lot of young Black coaches or minority coaches get their opportunities. So we have to look out for his platforms and continue to follow Coach Hewitt. But again, this is another episode, and I usually shout out a Black business, but this week I'm transitioning a little bit because we have a lot to celebrate. We just found out that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are the elected president and vice president of the United States. It's taken about 4 days to get these numbers. They're still counting votes. But most of the networks were okay with calling this one after President Biden or President-elect Biden was able to get Pennsylvania. And we have some other states that are still trying to show up. Georgia, where I'm from, big turnout and huge. I mean, that state is looking like it's going to turn blue for the first time since 1992 when President Clinton was elected. But I just want to give a shout out to everybody, especially in Georgia, who just stepped up and showed out, whether it was activism with protests during this racial climate, and whether it was people using social media to just get the initiative or the agenda out there about the importance of voting. And if it was just a podcast like this and just giving information and important dates for people to follow and to remember so they could register to vote. And so they would know when these elections were taking place so they could actually vote. So that was just amazing just to see. And I have to give a special shout out to Stacey Abrams. If you don't know her, she ran for governor of Georgia. She lost a tight race against Brian Kemp, but she was tremendous. And what she did was brought a lot of attention to the types of voter suppression that was going on in the state of Georgia. And she was really challenging the votes to see what took place. And then when she lost, it was kind of like, well, what's Stacey Abrams going to do next? Well, she did do some things next, and she paid attention and focused on the fact that it was going to be important to have people to vote for this election. Didn't matter if you were Republican, Democrat, whatever your party affiliation was, but she just emphasized the importance of voting. So we have to give a special shout out to Stacey Abrams, because if it wasn't for Stacey Abrams, if it wasn't for her creating her own initiatives to get the agenda out for voting, it's no way that Georgia would have turned blue. So I want to applaud Stacey Abrams, and I want to personally thank her for the job that she's done and the job she's continuing to do, a job well done. And if you want to see what her initiatives are, you can really go to her platform, which is the Fair Fight Action, which she started, like I said, back in 2019, but it was really to get the agenda out of the importance of voting and getting people registered. And with her platform, she's gotten over 800,000 people registered in the state of Georgia. But for Georgia, our work is not done. It's a big runoff election, January 5th, for 2 Senate seats. It's a runoff between Senator Kelly Loeffler and Raphael Warnock. That's a runoff between those 2 candidates. And then it will be another runoff between David Perdue and John Ossoff. Both of those elections or runoffs will take place on January 5th. If you are not a registered voter, you still have time to register and vote for this runoff for the federal election. And you have until December 7th to register to become a voter. This election is going to be very important because now that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris they're the elected president and vice president, their job's not done, and there's still a lot of work to do, and they're going to need the help of Congress. It's going to be very important that people in Georgia show up and show out again, go vote, because that election is going to be just as important as the one that was just called today on November 7th. So again, that's my shout out this week. It's just my state, just showing up and showing out. And just to say that was just tremendous effort. I applaud everybody that pushed the envelope to stress the importance of voting, but our work is not done. We have to continue to vote, and then we have to continue to hold our elected officials accountable and have a plan moving forward. So that is the shout out this week. It's called voting. Keep doing it and keep your foot on the gas. But again, this was an excellent episode. I enjoyed it, having a conversation with Paul Hewitt. Please check out episode 17. It was a good one. But we're going to hit you with one more episode before the year's up. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with episode 18. So stay tuned. We have plenty of episodes that are on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, on Buzzsprout, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts. You can find Talk That Talk with me, your host, Fallon Stokes. We're on plenty of platforms, and you can also follow us on our Instagram handle, which is Talk That Talk Fallon. So please continue to follow the platforms. Subscribe. It's free. And that's episode 17 this week. Stay tuned for the next one. Have a good one.